You know, when I told myself that I should make a video on each of Kubrick's movies, I thought it was going to be fun. But then I remembered Lolita, and I remembered how much I hate Lolita. Not because it's a bad movie, but because it is good, and it makes me feel gross. For those who don't know, Kubrick's film Lolita is based on a novel by Vladimir Nabokov, which tells the story of a middle-aged college professor who becomes infatuated with a preteen girl, and all the gross tragedy that surrounds that kind of perversion. So yeah, I actually wrote out this essay, finished it, and then seriously considered not making this video because I felt so terrible just from writing and thinking about this movie. But after mulling it over, I decided that I think it is a worthwhile movie to talk about. I think there's an important message here about the nature of true evil and how we respond to it. Because ultimately, Lolita is a film about evil. Not only does it deal with exactly the kind of themes of control and tyranny that I've been tracing through Kubrick's other films, and not only does it deal with horrific transformation, in this case of an innocent victim, but this kind of manipulation and tragedy is unfortunately the closest to home of any of Kubrick's films. It doesn't take place in a future science fiction world deep in space or in a future dystopia. It doesn't take place in the distant past like Barry Lyndon, or in a far-off war-torn country, or even in a now alien atmosphere of atomic dread. It takes place not only within living memory, but in a neighborhood or on a country road trip, much like ours. It's not bound to a certain time or to a situation that's different from the everyday life of most people living, say, in America. It's a statement about the banality of evil and how close the most horrific evils can get to us without us really realizing it. And while I personally still wonder whether such topics as the film covers should be dealt with comedically, I think Kubrick does use comedy in this film to make a point which we might not want to reckon with, namely that evil often wears a kind and friendly face.
He thought Lolita was a fantastic book because it clarified the feeling we all have that good and evil does not come in the expected package.
Much like Dr. Strangelove, which turns the prospect of nuclear annihilation into a comedy, Lolita recounts one of the greatest crimes that one human can commit against another as a dark comedy, which is why this film is so difficult to reckon with. It's one thing to laugh at a massive tragedy caused by human incompetence. It's another thing to laugh at actual willful evil. We're not supposed to laugh at predators. And make no mistake, there are still some genuinely laugh-out-loud moments in this film, especially from Peter Sellers. The part at the beginning where he keeps taking ping pong balls out of his sleeve always catches me off guard and makes me laugh. The problem with this is that laughter is one of the most powerful means of connecting with other people. So we naturally object to portraying evil people in this way, because we don't want to connect with them. We might say, okay, I get that evil people are often kind, charming, seductive, and friendly, but can't we portray this without making us laugh? And I think the answer is no. The only way we can appreciate the true power of being manipulated is if the film does its best to manipulate us, just as a predator manipulates his victims. But thankfully, this is not the only dimension of the film. You see, there are two ways to write comedy. One is, as I have just said, to write characters who invite the audience to laugh with them. The second way is to write characters whom the audience is meant to laugh at, people who are unintentionally fools and idiots. For example, if you think of a classic Looney Tunes cartoon, they often wrote their stories with both sides of this comedic binary, with one character representing each perspective. We are meant to laugh with Bugs Bunny and at Elmer Fudd. And Lolita takes both of these approaches as well. Peter Sellers plays an arch predator whom we are meant to laugh with, and he's the one who's manipulating us. James Mason plays the predator that we are meant to laugh at, because he's constantly being made a fool of. And to be fair, the same applies to a degree to Peter Sellers' character as well. In fact, we are saved from taking either of them too seriously by the very names of their characters. Claire Quilty and Humbert Humbert. These are clownish names for absurd characters. And I think it's this second kind of comedy that is meant to be the way we escape from being manipulated. We escape by laughing at evil instead of with it. And all we have to do is to actually look up at it, look it right in the eyes, and see it for what it is. Call it by its name, instead of merely seeing things from their perspective. I'll appeal again to a quote from G.K. Chesterton that I've mentioned in another video. He wrote that it is not enough that the optimistic reformer should think injustice distressing. He must think injustice absurd, an anomaly in existence, a matter less for tears than for a shattering laughter. Now personally, I think there is no punishment too severe for child predators. But when we continually highlight how massively evil something is, and only take it with deadly seriousness, then paradoxically, we almost invariably elevate evil people to a status of myth, making them boogeymen. And infamy may be the stepchild of fame, but it is still related to glory by at least one parent. And if we don't want to glorify evil, we have to laugh it to scorn. God doesn't frown when he wipes evil off of the earth. He laughs from the heavens at the foolishness of the evil he is destroying, as the second Hebrew psalm tells us. Maybe Kubrick is telling us that when it comes to these evil people, we should be laughing at them even as we punish them. Just because we laugh doesn't mean we shouldn't swing the sword while doing so. And after all, that is in a sense what the film does. The evil men in it are punished, if ever so little, much less than they deserve, even on this side of hell. Their punishment is threefold: absurdity, slavery, and death. The predators become absurd, and the absurdity itself is at once Dostoevskian, a kind of punishment within the crime itself, and more specifically, Miltonic. The tyrant himself becomes a slave. And here, the controller is always controlled. Make no mistake, at bottom, beneath the perversion and underlying it, Lolita is a film about power and control, which is hinted at from the very first scene.
I'm really winning. I hope I don't get overcome with power.
Humbert and Quilty, the two predators, play a game which Humbert doesn't want to play, but Quilty does. He does like playing games, and he likes forcing people to play, which he does here, dressed as a Roman senator.
Listen. Let's have a game, a little lovely game of Roman ping pong, like two civilized senators.
This harkens back to the film Kubrick directed before this one, Spartacus, where the Romans and their leaders are the epitome of tyranny. Some have suggested, perhaps dubiously, that Lolita, the novel, is a veiled attack on totalitarianism, particularly the communism which destroyed Nabokov's native Russia. Whether or not that is the case, Kubrick himself is using this opportunity to blend large-scale political tyranny with the small-scale tyranny of predatory men.
I forbid you to disturb Professor Humbert again. He is a writer and he is not to be disturbed.
Sieg Heil.
Maybe these two kinds of tyranny can shed light on each other, as well as on the culture which binds them together. It's fascinating that these crimes against human nature should take place in West Ramsdale, a place which is marked by a concern for racial purity and its sense of superiority, as well as a concern for progressivism with its sense of superiority.
Culturally, we're a very advanced group with lots of good Anglo-Dutch and Anglo-Scotch stock, and we're very progressive intellectually.
That is immediately apparent.
Lolita's mother, who embodies this spirit of superiority, represents a kind of hubris that is not only blinded by its own delusions of superiority, but also creates a home where children are vulnerable to those who would prey on them. And the phone number for that home is 1776.
1776. Declaration of Independence.
Make of this what you will. Does this make the home a symbol for all of America? as vulnerable to friendly predators as any individual household? Is it an ironic slight on America's ideals?
I wonder if you aren't being too liberal with her.
Liberal.
Or is it a more specific critique of the unique culture ramping up in America in the 1960s? Because not only does this film offer a scathing caricature of people who like to call themselves progressive, but it seems to excoriate people who think of themselves as broad-minded, transgressing traditional mores. These are people who idolize artists, playwrights, and celebrities, people like Claire Quilty. Compare all of this to Quilty's appeal to modern Americanism later in the film.
So in our opinion, she is suffering from acute repression of the libido, of the natural instincts.
I fail to see the significance of all this as far as her record as a student is concerned, Dr. Zinn.
We Americans, we are progressively modern. We believe that it is equally important to prepare the pupils for the mutually satisfactory mating and the successful child rearing. That is what we believe.
If the modern House of Independence becomes the locus of manipulation and control, it is only because the mother invites men into her home who embody liberalism and the ironically named liberal arts. But these men are not exactly what they seem. Or maybe they are exactly what they seem, and for some reason, the mother can't process the fact that this man is always staring at her daughter. When a man dressed as a Roman senator says that he is a slave, she would believe what he says rather than what he wears. Kubrick explicitly references his earlier film when he has Quilty say, "No, I'm Spartacus."
Are you Quilty? No, I'm Spartacus. You come to free the slaves or something?
This not only sets a tone of deception, but it gives an immediate flavor to that deception. Quilty is dressed as a Roman senator, but he's saying, "I'm not who you think I am. I'm the victim. I'm the good guy. I'm the guy fighting for freedom." And we can see that he forces Humbert to play his game, not by holding a gun to his head. It's actually Humbert who has the gun in his pocket. But Quilty controls him by being playful, funny, seemingly helpless, but unflinchingly stubborn. He tries to reinforce Humbert's sense of control by constantly calling him Captain, as if Humbert were a commanding officer. But he also disorients Humbert by being absurd, acting in illogical ways, subverting common sense, and subverting Humbert's expectations. His expectations for accepted human behavior, and what he expected of the man who had been manipulating him over the course of events that the film covers, thus causing Humbert to momentarily lose his bearings and lose the game. But Humbert is a sore loser, and he too is a controller. Pulling the gun from his pocket, Humbert insists on making sure that Quilty knows he is going to die, that there is nothing that he can do to escape his death. Humbert is going to kill him. But he's also going to force Quilty to read his own death sentence beforehand. Thus, the opening scene places Humbert firmly in the center of this web of control. Through the rest of the film, he will control others, but he himself will also be controlled. Obviously, he tries to control both Lolita and her mother. Just as Quilty will beat Humbert in ping pong, Humbert plays a game against Lolita's mother, which she doesn't really know how to play. Just as the HAL 9000 would beat Frank at a game of chess as a functional symbol for outwitting him later, Humbert beats Charlotte at chess as well. Only in this instance, his goal is to take something or someone who belongs to her.
You're going to take my queen?
That was my intention, certainly.
But Charlotte also controls Humbert. She forces Humbert to dance just as Quilty forced him into a game of ping pong. And in the same vein as Quilty's strategy, Charlotte controls from a point of weakness, threatening even to kill herself if he doesn't do what she wants.
But if I ever found out that you didn't believe in God, I think I would commit suicide.
Eventually, Humbert explodes at her attempts to control him.
Even in the most harmonious household such as ours, not all the decisions are taken by the female, especially when the male partner has fulfilled his obligations beyond the line of duty. When you wanted me to spend my afternoon sunbathing by the lake, I was glad to become the bronze glamour boy for your sake instead of remaining the scholar. Even then, I scoot along after you like an obliging little lapdog. Oh yes, I'm happy, I'm delighted to be bossed by you, but every game has its rules.
When Lolita's mother is out of the picture, it's Quilty who starts controlling Humbert by playing games with him. Just as Humbert had deceptively adopted the roles of different characters and even tried to convince Lolita's mother that things weren't what they seemed to be when she discovered his diary, Quilty makes things seem to be other than they are by adopting different characters and personas, pretending to be a police officer and a psychologist. And ultimately, when Quilty pretends to be Lolita's uncle, stepping in and taking her out of the hospital and out of Humbert's control altogether, Humbert is threatened with the ultimate symbol of powerlessness, the straitjacket.
Oh, where is she?
Sydney, get a straitjacket.
All right.
But Quilty doesn't escape punishment either. The equation of tyranny is always balanced, and Quilty himself, who gets a kick out of controlling others, both Lolita and Humbert, is ultimately controlled by Humbert, by being killed, literally through the fantastic device of the painting, which is reminiscent of a shot that Kubrick used in an earlier film, Killer's Kiss. The reason I didn't talk about Kubrick's second feature film earlier is because I thought it would work well here. Kubrick was 26 years old when he made Killer's Kiss, a film that runs a little over an hour. And it's generally not regarded to be among his best films. It's not thematically strong, and it lacks the obsessive planning and detail that Kubrick would later be famous for. It was a sloppy film by his standards. But what's important about this film is the photography. Kubrick was making a transition from being a photographer to being a filmmaker, and in Killer's Kiss, it really shows. Whereas the writing and acting are unremarkable, and the sound design is really not great at all, it's still worth watching just for the visuals. As a photographer, Kubrick had been able to tell complete stories with single still images, an ability which would be put to good use years later in a film like Barry Lyndon, and which, even at this early stage, created visual scenes that continue to be uniquely compelling. The incredible final fight in the mannequin factory, which has to be one of the most dangerous-looking fights from the 50s, is incredibly rich symbolically, without, to me, feeling overly artsy. These two men, one of them a washed-up boxer and the other one a gangster, basically are fighting to the death over a woman that neither of them really truly loves. The former man has only known her for like 2 days, and the latter tried to kill her a few moments ago. And so it makes sense that they are both throwing around mannequins as if they were throwing around women as objects. Not only is this theme relevant to Lolita, but so is the way that the boxer kills the gangster. As he drives a pole into the gangster, Kubrick cuts to a mannequin head, and this becomes a much more refined kind of shot in the killing of Claire Quilty in Lolita. Leading up to this shot, Quilty begs for his life in a last-ditch effort to escape his fate, telling Humbert that if Humbert spares him, he'll leave the country and Humbert can move in. Quilty even offers to send quote-unquote friends up to Humbert, whom he can use as furniture.
I got some nice friends, who could come and keep you company here. You could use them as pieces of furniture. This one guy looks just like a bookcase.
Such a blatant reference to the literal objectification of people, treating them like furniture, sets the tone for the rest of the film. Quilty treats people like furniture, but he himself could have been mistaken for furniture when Humbert first walks into the mansion. The objectifier becomes objectified, and as Humbert reloads his gun and kills Quilty, the latter is cosmetically concealed into an object that can't even be used for anything except to look at.
Just you. There's nobody else. Just watching. Watch. You like watching, Captain?
I do not care at all to possess the girl in the external sense, but wish to enjoy her artistically. Therefore, the beginning must be as artistic as possible. The beginning must be as nebulous as possible. It must be an omnipossibility. If she promptly sees a deceiver in me, then she misunderstands me, for I am no deceiver in the ordinary sense. If she sees a faithful lover in me, then she also misunderstands me. So wrote Soren Kierkegaard in his quasi-novella, The Seducer's Diary, which records a man's seduction of a young woman. Obviously, we celebrate art and aesthetics a lot on this channel, but I think this is a great occasion for remembering that, in Kierkegaard's philosophy, the aesthetic stage of life is the one that, in contrast to the ethical and religious, is marked by vice and evil. It's the realm of theatrical performances and Don Juan, capped off at the end of the first part of his book Either Or by this elaborate blueprint for how to control another person. He who does not know how to encircle a girl so that she loses sight of everything he does not want her to see. He who does not know how to poetize himself into a girl so that it is from her that everything proceeds as he wants it. He is and remains a bungler. I shall not envy him his enjoyment. Such a person is and remains a bungler, a seducer, which I can by no means be called. I am an aesthete, an eroticist, who has grasped the nature and the point of love, who believes in love and knows it from the ground up. To poetize oneself into a girl is an art. To poetize oneself out of her is a masterstroke. These are the words of a degenerate person speaking, and Kierkegaard does not want us to be that kind of person. But neither is Kierkegaard saying that we shouldn't be aesthetic at all. We should. In fact, we should add all of Kierkegaard's stages of life together, and we should become aesthetic, ethical, and religious. But when we leave one of those higher stages out, there is always some kind of danger that ensues. In Lolita, in particular, we see how pure aestheticism, which is the realm of feeling and emotion without restraining ethics, we see how that realm of pure desire and eroticism leads directly to control. Like Kierkegaard's Seducer's Diary, Lolita confronts us with this kind of predatory love. And I'm using the word love, though very loosely, because this word, without qualification, is indeed used to justify all manner of predation. From Milton's Satan, who himself invokes a kind of love, to the Greeks, for whom eros applied as equally to wives as to teenage boys. And we need qualifications that make it clear that not all love is equal. Not all love can be taken at face value. If Milton confronts us with the idea that predators can trick us into thinking they love us when they don't, Kubrick and Kierkegaard startle us with the unsettling reality that even predators can have illusions that they really love their prey. Perhaps the most troubling aspect of this film is not that evil wears a friendly face, but that evil doesn't even recognize itself. Tyrants don't recognize their tyranny. Humbert constantly wants to provide for Lolita, making her food and doting on her.
Magnificent spread. Did you have something to eat?
Oh, they served some kind of salty fish eggs, but I didn't like them.
Oh, well, I'll make you a sandwich. There's lots of food left over.
Humbert may have illusions of wanting the best for Lolita, maybe even genuine illusions, all while controlling and destroying her. Indeed, so far we've talked a lot about control in this essay, but we haven't yet mentioned the tragedy of transformation that happens as a result of this control. Yet another very difficult dimension of this film to reckon with is the idea that Lolita herself, though she is in a very genuine sense a victim, she's not a good person. According to Lolita's mother, Lolita is a monster.
How did we produce such a little beast?
And this is a fact which Kubrick tells us the first time we see Lolita. He cuts from her to the mummy. Just as Humbert spies on the dancing teenagers, Lolita is, accused at least, of spying on the dancing adults.
The idea of her sneaking back here and spying on us.
I don't think she was spying on us.
Oh, really? What would you call it?
I'm sure she intended no harm.
Like hell she didn't. She's always been a spiteful little pest since the age of 1. Do you know she kept throwing her toys out of her crib so that I would have to keep stooping over to pick them up? She has always had some kind of gripe against me. Now she sees herself as some kind of a starlet. Well, I see her as a sturdy, healthy, but decidedly homely child.
The mother feels like the child has been controlling her, even from the age of 1. But of course, this all comes from the mouth of a mother who clearly has her own demons. But nevertheless, we don't need the mother's word to see how Lolita tries to exercise power over Humbert.
Put your head back. Open your mouth. You can have one little bite.
Despite what Charlotte had said about Lolita as a baby, I think we can infer that it wasn't until Quilty first preyed on her that Lolita really became the monster. Abuse creates abusers, and tyranny creates more tyrants.
Because you took her at an age when young lad...
You see, I'd had a crush on him ever since the times that he used to come and visit Mother. He wasn't like you and me. He wasn't a normal person. He was a genius. He had a kind of, beautiful Japanese, Oriental philosophy of life.
Lolita is formed by the actions of those outside her, eventually becoming sharp and methodical with a penchant for controlling adults. And if Humbert has illusions of love, Lolita, of all people, is the closest thing to an unfeeling, unemotional, unloving psychopath who has a solely intellectual delight in manipulating others. Once again, evil doesn't come in the expected package. If we ask for a solution to these problems, or look for some kind of hope, I don't think we'll find either of those things from Kubrick. Not in this film. If anything, this seems to me to be a preemptive warning. Whether or not Kubrick was warning us that, I don't know, academia and Hollywood might be infested with predators.
Sort of looked like a diary when I came in.
I always write my poems in a diary. It's one of my little idiosyncrasies.
Afraid somebody's gonna steal your ideas and sell them to Hollywood, huh? And he was on his way to Hollywood to write one of those spectaculars. And he promised to get me a studio contract. But it never turned out that way, and instead he wanted me to cooperate with the others, making some kind of an art movie.
Anyway, whether or not that's the case, I take this to be a call to watch ourselves, making sure, first of all, that we don't create a house where people can be preyed upon, but also making sure that we ourselves are innocent as doves, lest we become misguided predators, as well as a call to be as shrewd as serpents, lest we become the prey of serpents. But you all can let me know what you think. Did I get it right, or am I missing something? Should a film like this even have been made? I don't know. I tried to present this movie in the best light possible and make an argument for it, but I personally have my doubts. I think we can deal with evil and understand it without necessarily portraying it. And I can definitely say that this is hands down the least favorite video I've ever made. I think I felt the same way about making this video as C.S. Lewis did about writing the Screw Tape Letters. It's important to understand evil, but at a certain point, when you keep trying to get into that headspace, you can't study evil without being affected by it in a very negative way. There is a sense, I think, in which the knowledge of evil really is a curse, and that your diet really should consist of fruit from the tree of life, rather than the tree of knowledge. Anyway, I'm rambling. Thank you all for watching, as always, and I'll catch you next time.